Hello everybody and welcome back to the Code Wrinkles channel for a brand new video, and this time is once again Blazor time. We're gonna talk about Blazor components right now, and more than that we're gonna show you, or I'm gonna show you what I think it might be one of the best ways to handle new components, or how to create new components when we want to add them to the application. What I want to do right now is use an API, and for that I found a very cool API that is actually also free without authentication, so it's really like heaven for Blazor because we can just send requests and get some information and work with them. And that API is also very geeky because it's about Star Wars. So in this video we'll try to call that API, that Star Wars API, receive a list of characters, and of course display that list of characters in a Blazor application. What I have right now is a standard template with a Blazor WebAssembly project, and this is exactly where we will get started. The only thing that I have done, or that I have added to the standard project, is right here in program.cs, where we add our HTTP client service. I have changed to use as a base address the base address for the Star Wars API. So that's basically the API from where we are gonna take our characters, our Star Wars characters. But other than that, it's really a standard Blazor project that we will work on right now to create a new component. Now, if we think about creating new components, there are some things that we might have to take into consideration. So first of all, of course, where do we place those components? And for that, I have a video already on the channel, which is about how to structure a Blazor application in what I suppose would be a very good way, because it inherits, or it applies a lot of the principles that I've personally learned from Angular and other front-end frameworks. But before we can get started and really write the component, we have to do some basic setup in order to be able to call that API, to receive the information, to be able to easily parse that information, and then display it in a component. So let's start to do that, and first of all we would need a class that would represent the response that we get from the API. In this case we will create a new folder. Once again, if you didn't watch the video about structuring Blazor applications, please do watch the video. I will write it down in the description of this video so you can watch it. But the main idea is that here for this class we need a new folder which is called core, because it's actually something that regards our data access service. In this case our data access service will be something very simple. It will just provide a class that we will use to get the API response. But let's add a subfolder here first, and I hope to go through this setup real quick. Of course, here let's name it the data service, because here we'll put everything that belongs to the data service, and eventually, probably in later videos, we'll go ahead and add a real data service that wraps the entire HTTP client, so that in our components we'll be just able to simply run methods from that service like get all characters, and the data service will handle all the logic behind calling the API and so on. This is not a concern that our components would have, but for right now I just want to focus on the components. So in this data service folder, let's create a new class, and this would be a plain Poco class that will represent a response, and let's call it a Star Wars response. And to be a little bit quicker, to not really do a lot of things here, I will simply copy and paste some code that I have already written, because I think it's way faster and it's better. It doesn't make any sense to make this video so long. So these are a few properties like the count, next, the previous. Sorry, but this is here a typo. The previous is basically because the response is when you get a list of characters are paged, and then you have the next and the previous to indicate the next page, respectively the previous page, if you want to get additional information. But then it has also an array, and in our case it will be an array of characters. So we have to also create a class that is called character. But if we think about what we want to do in our application right now, it's basically that well, we want to add a new feature. And the feature is displaying or playing around with Star Wars characters. So that's why I would add a new folder here to this application, and I would call this folder characters. And as per the video about structuring components, here in this folder we'll put really everything that we will need about our characters feature. And the first thing that we would need here is a class that would represent a character. So let's name this as a character class. And also this time I will just copy and paste some code, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to spend a lot of time writing a bunch of properties here. I really want to concentrate on the component part. And here, as we can see, is just a bunch of properties that we have defined. We also want to have some attributes here that map the name of those properties with JSON fields, because these are this is the format that we receive from the Star Wars API. And of course, we don't want to use that exact format in our property names, because it's totally against C# coding best practices, but that's the entire idea. So these are basically properties, attributes, as if you wish, that describe a Star Wars character. And the only thing that we will still have to use is simply to go back here and also add another property, public, and this would be a character array, and it should have the name of results in order to be able to map the response from the API. And with this we are pretty much set. So right now what we still need is to create the component. So this is the core of this video, creating components the right way. Now we have right now a component. Let's create a subfolder here in characters, or no, it doesn't really make sense. Let's create a new component at all. And we see that when we click add, we have this Blazor component, and this is actually a Blazor component that we can add to our project. And let's call this a character list component. Okay, and this is a very basic component. Let's close this file and open it again. And right now, yeah, right now it's better. Good. Now there is one very important thing that I want to discuss with you right now. As you see in most of the tutorials online, or in different trainings or videos on YouTube, whatever, usually when we talk about components, we have some markup and we have some C# code that we run, or that we write actually, in this code directive within the same file. Now from my point of view, this is not really a best practice when it comes to creating real applications. And I don't necessarily mean production applications, but if you just want to play around, create your own applications, this might not be the best approach, because components could have, if you use tables and very important nested structures, then components could get very messy. You would have a lot of markup right there, and we can assume you would have 500 lines of code of markup, and then having another 400 lines of C# code in the same file. That's not really what I would call readable, and I wouldn't say that this is according to coding best practices. I would say this would be a code smell. So what I would like to achieve is to have kind of a separation of concerns principle, but at the level of how we structure our files. And the cool thing about components in Blazor is that they actually support partial classes. And what this allows us to do, it allows us to split basically a component in two different files. And then we can have the markup in one file, and in that file we'll have only markup or Blazor syntax, and we have the necessary C# code for the logic for that component in a total separate file that would be a normal CS file. And that's actually very easy to implement in Blazor. You just have to create a new class. So let's go here in the same folder and add a new class. And the only thing that we would need to do here is name this class exactly like we have that character list component, only that it should end with .cs. So it would be characters, and it's character list. I should make sure I type this exactly the same way. So it would be character list component.razor.cs. Now what happens right now is that we have created this class. What we can do is say this is a partial class, and this is how we will basically link it to the Blazor file. And there is one other thing that we have to do, and this is make this class inherit from a component base. This is actually the way that you make your own class be a real Blazor component. It just needs to inherit from this component base. Now, right now, as you can see, basically under this character list component.razor, we can enlarge this and we see that we have these subfiles, and one of these files is character list component.razor.cs. So exactly our class that we created right now. So from this point on, actually in this Razor file, we will put only markup, so we can get rid of this type of code here. And in this other file, in this character list component.razor.cs, we'll put only the C# code that we need. Let's start working on this markup, and let's name this as a title. We just want to have characters. There are some things that we want to do in this component. First of all, we want it to be a routed component, so we say page, and this is how we define routes on components. And we say that if we are in a page, or if we navigate to characters, then what I want to do is basically display this component, and this should theoretically do it. Sorry, we have of course to use it like that, but I'm not sure exactly why. It's okay, so it's okay right now. So this means that if you go to your root folder and then /characters, then this component that we work on right now should be rendered. And in fact, I guess we can already test this. If we run the application, it will take probably a few seconds to run. Hopefully not too long. And yeah, it loads. Right now it's the first time that the application runs, so it means that it will download all the DLLs. So if I type here / then characters, I would expect that I would have this characters. I would expect that I would have this characters component, and in fact that's correct, because I can see that I have this title. Now of course, as I basically made a request from the browser that actually reloads the entire application, so this is why we don't have this as a normal navigation in a single page application, because we actually request the entire application once more from the server. But the idea is that our component right now is working, so we can then just go on and add some more details to this. And what I will do is I will also right now copy and paste some markup that I've already created, because once again, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to spend 15 minutes just to write some markup for a very basic table. And I have an error, and this is because of course we have to define these characters. That's a property that we would have to define on our partial class, so in code. So what we will do here is create a new property that would be public. It would be character array, so an array of characters, and let's call it characters, to be exactly like it is on the markup. And if we go back, right now we see that yeah, we don't have errors anymore, and the only thing that we do here is basically if the characters array is null, so if it is not populated with any value, then we will display this loading. But if we have something in this characters array, even if it is an empty array, it is still not null, then we will try to render a table, and probably we'll have the table head, but we won't have any rows in the table if the array is empty. But for the markup, I guess that's mostly it. So it's not really we don't really need to do anything else. Even though, sorry, I guess we still need to do something. We want also to inject the HTTP client, because we saw earlier we have injected it in our dependency injection collection in program.cs. So to inject services, we just use the inject directive, and we say that what we want to inject the HTTP client, and we'll call it HTTP. And we don't necessarily need to use semicolons here. And right now what this means, being a partial class, this characters list component.razor.cs, this means that we could actually use this HTTP client also here, because we injected it in the component in the Razor part, let's say. Now, the only thing that we would have to think about when we design components is where do we actually want to get the data from our services. And if we want to do that, it's actually very similar to what we have in other front-end frameworks. It's the idea of lifecycle methods or lifecycle events. So we can think about a component as something that comes in life at a certain point when we navigate to it, for instance. It lives, it goes through different stages of living till it reaches a point where it is disposed when we navigate away, for instance. So this is a life cycle for a component, and this life cycle may have some very specific points in time where we can implement some logic, and these are called like lifecycle events or lifecycle hooks. So we can really hook up into such lifecycle events and then perform our logic right there. So what we will do right now is we will do exactly that. So we will override and we'll basically do something in such an event. So we have to protected, I should also write correctly. So it would be protected override, but it's still, once again, protected override async task. And you see that we get some information here on what methods we can override, and the method that we are looking for is this onInitialized async. And this is triggered when the entire component is initialized, so everything was made possible, the services were injected, and so on. So, and right, this is the point where we might want to get our data in. And actually this wouldn't be very complicated because we already have this HTTP. So what we can do here is then just have a var response equals and then await, of course, because we are in an async method, and we will await HTTP. We have this extension method in system.net HTTP JSON, which is get from JSON async. And this method is also generic, so we can also tell them what exactly do we want to get from JSON. So we say here that we want to get back, and in this case we will get back this Star Wars response. So let's use it, Star Wars response. And of course, one other thing that we need to provide here is exactly the URL, the endpoint to which we actually want to make a call. And let me also paste that in here, but we'll say what we have here. Let's maybe also get this on one other line so that it would be displayed correctly. Okay, so right now, what do we do here? We basically use this HTTP, and for this, okay, we don't have async. Sorry for that. I said a lot of times that this method is async, but I think when I chose from the options of overloads that I could override, I guess that it deleted the async that I have written previously. However, right now that is solved. So what we'll do right now is we'll use that HTTP client, will make a GET request to this endpoint, which is according to the documentation of the Star Wars API. We'll get that response, and then we'll also serialize that response and create, or basically assign it to this Star Wars response. And in this response variable, we'll get the object that we need actually. So what we can do here is nothing more, nothing less than say characters equals response.results. And actually, I think that that should do it for now. So right now, I guess if nothing goes wrong in our component, we would have to get the list of characters. But before we try this out, let me also very quickly improve the behavior. So we want to have this characters button or a link to it right on the left nav bar. So for this, we will go on the nav menu, and here is the list of the different navigation options that we have. So we just copy one over, and here we want to go to characters, and we should also name these characters, and I think that should do it. So right now when we run the application, we should see a characters button right on the left sidebar, and when we click on it, it should load the list of characters without having to make a new server reload. So there wouldn't be a new round trip to the server. So let's try it out, characters, and indeed you see that we get here a list of characters in a very nice table. And so just like that, in a very few steps, we have implemented our first component. And I wouldn't like to really stick around more about discussions of how we can optimize this component, because there are several other videos that handle topics like how we create data service, how do we do error handling, how do we do logging, and so on. And I really, there is a playlist on this Code Wrinkles channels which is called Blazor. Just go to that playlist and look into it, because you'll find a lot of videos that cover a lot of topics that we might use in Blazor. So right now I just want to make a very short recap, a short summary of what we have done so far. So we just wanted to add a component to our application. That component would have to make a call to a Star Wars API to get a list of characters and display it in our application in a new component. For that we have created a new folder called characters, because this would be a new feature of our application. We have also created a folder core, and in that folder core a subfolder data service, where we have created the model for our API response so that we can easily deserialize the JSON response. And then what we did is basically we created this component, but, and this is from my point of view the very important part, when you create real applications, you don't really want to have markup code and C# code mixed in the same file. So this is why I think that the best way, the right way to work with components in Blazor is to have the C# code separated from the markup. And this is achieved very easily through partial class support that we have in Blazor. So in this case, we just created a Razor component that is called character list component.razor, and we have created a new class that has exactly the same name. So it's character list component.razor, but it has a .cs at the end. And this would be then our class. And we have made this class being partial and make it inherit from component base. And by doing this, this class just was linked to this component in Razor, so to the markup part. And right now, starting now, we can have here only markup in the Razor file, and all the logic that we need, we implement it here in this C# file, in this class, in this standalone class, where we would have only and only C# code, so no markup here. So that's the basic of creating components the right way. Of course, there's more to components than this when it comes to component communication, handling state, and things like that. But as said, just look around on this channel, because you'll find a lot of other great resources regarding Blazor. And if you don't find a video right now on the topic that you would expect, then just let me know, maybe in a comment. That would be really great. I would highly appreciate it. And also bear in mind that the content is ongoing here, so I'm still creating content maybe 2 or 3 times per week. So if you don't see a topic right now, it could be that that it would be here in a few days. So in this case, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do that. Please hit the subscribe button. That would be really very much appreciated, and it would also give me the necessary motivation to really keep on doing this, and hoping that I would be able to really help other people that want to get started with Blazor, or in general that want to get better at programming. Sharing my knowledge is a thing that I do very pleasantly, but it's also more pleasant if I know that really my knowledge sharing helps other people to get better. This being said, thank you very much for watching. It was a pleasure having you here, and I hope I will be able to meet you again on this channel very soon. Have a great day. Bye.